Thank you, Presiding Officer. And may I begin by congratulating Steve Clark and the Scotland men's team on a great victory against Haiti and wish them all the best against Morocco. Last week, I asked the First Minister about a major problem with social housing in Scotland. A loophole where thousands of new arrivals from outside Scotland are able to present as homeless and must be found temporary accommodation by councils, who are then forced to place them ahead of local Scots already on the waiting list for permanent accommodation. In his answer last week, the First Minister did not seem to recognise there was any loophole at all. But the fact remains there has been a surge in demand for temporary accommodation in Scotland, and in Glasgow alone, 64% of those in temporary accommodation came to the UK as asylum seekers. Surely the First Minister must agree that it is unfair for local Scots on the long waiting list for permanent accommodation to be shunted to the back of the queue in order to give temporary accommodation instead to new arrivals. Does the First Minister not recognise this is fundamentally a matter of fairness and that Scottish hospitality is being abused by queue jumping?
First Minister.
I think what Malcolm Offord does with that question is use language which I think spreads division in our society, and it has to be called out for what it is, and it's exactly what I said last week with the language that Mr Offord used last week. There is the application of our approach to allocation of housing is based on equality for all individuals, and nobody is put to the back of the queue, to use the language that Mr Offord has used. What we do is we apply the principle that people who are eligible for housing in Scotland should be treated as eligible for housing in Scotland, and we apply houses accordingly on that basis.
Malcolm Offord.
So the First Minister once again doesn't answer the question. My question was entirely measured and factual, and I have not had a response. Perhaps he might write to me with a response. Moving from Glasgow to Dundee, the First Minister will be aware of the distressing incident last year involving a 12-year-old local girl who was arrested and widely vilified for wielding an axe and a knife to fend off a Bulgarian migrant and his sister. The legal process triggered by this distressing incident has now concluded, and the 12-year-old girl has been exonerated by the sheriff. The Bulgarian migrant has been found guilty of assaulting the child and of behaving in a threatening and abusive manner, including making sexual remarks to her and 3 other local girls. Now, at the time, Police Scotland hit out at misinformation online, which turned out to be true. And when Elon Musk posted the question, what kind of government arrests little girls who try to defend themselves, the First Minister also piled in, accusing him of spreading misinformation. The mother of this child, quite rightly, has demanded an apology from the police and from the First Minister for her daughter being branded as a liar, right-wing and a racist. So my question is, now this case has concluded, will the First Minister take this opportunity to issue such an apology?
First Minister.
Sir, the approach that I take on all of these matters is to follow carefully the advice that is offered to me and the quality information that can be available to me. And at the time of this particular incident, the information available to me, provided through Police Scotland, led me to the conclusion that I set out. And also, I'm certainly going to make no apology for taking on Elon Musk, who I don't think is an actor in good faith on these questions, if I may say so. Now, Mr Offord is absolutely right that the legal process in this case is concluded, and the legal process indicates exactly as Mr Offord has indicated. So there is no reason for me to sustain the points that were put to me at the time in the statements by Police Scotland. So I of course apologise to the young woman and her family concerned, because we should all be dealing with the situation as the information presents it. But I'd simply caution Mr Offord on the tack that he's taking here, because I've seen too many cases where malevolent right-wing actors have piled in on particular issues to sow division in our society to have been proved to be completely incorrect. And there was a case in Stirling where the Police Scotland had to intervene very directly to counter the type of rhetoric that Elon Musk was circulating on in this particular case, and on that occasion was being circulated by Tommy Robinson. So I suppose the lesson that we should all draw from all of this is that we should all be very, very careful about what we say, because if we're not, we're going to fall into the trap of the right-wing malevolent individuals who are determined to sow division in our society, and I want to have none of that in Scotland.
Malcolm Offord.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think there is another lesson to be learned from this, because this unfortunate case in Dundee brings into sharp focus the reality that white working-class girls across the UK have not been believed by the authorities when reporting sexual abuse. And this was illustrated by the remarks made at the time by Humza Yousaf, a former First Minister and a sitting MSP, who watched the video and immediately passed judgment that this young person has had a significant amount of trauma in her life, and I can guarantee that without knowing fully her circumstances. So judgment made without even meeting her, judgment made just by looking at her. So in light of this sorry saga, can I press the First Minister on the status of the grooming gangs inquiry in Scotland that the SNP promised shortly before the election? When exactly will it begin, and when will its terms of reference be released?
First Minister.
President, on the first point that Mr Offord makes in relation to the reporting of sexual crimes and the actions taken to address sexual crimes in our society on women and girls in our society, because that's the general way I'm going to address that question, I think from the statistics that are regularly reported, and from even the discussions that we had yesterday about the record of Dorothy Bain as the Lord Advocate, Scotland has a formidable record of taking seriously the complaints of women and girls about sexual abuse and sexual violence, and I want to make it clear to Parliament that that will remain the case throughout the term of this government, because it is absolutely vital that where women and girls have experiences of sexual violence and sexual assault, that they have the confidence to report them. And it's clear from the conduct and the leadership of the former Lord Advocate, and I'm certain about that, about the Lord Advocate designate who will be sworn in at the Court of Session tomorrow, that the same approach will be taken in relation to the prosecution of such crimes. And indeed, one of the issues we're wrestling with in our prison population is the fact that very substantial numbers of individuals are now serving long prison sentences because of the perpetrating of sexual crimes of this nature. In relation to the grooming gangs inquiry, the Government has established the leadership of the grooming gangs inquiry, and the work is underway to ensure the terms of reference are finalised and the inquiry can start its work at the first available opportunity.